So a couple of really big things took place today. Well, in the last 24 hours, Alberta had a test run at what it would look like to actually vote in a referendum in a very isolated part of the province, a UCP stronghold. Now, there's a big battle within the UCP right now. A lot of people that support Danielle Smith, support her, but also would rather separate, and a lot of people wouldn't. And so you're seeing a shift right now, and we actually have a bit of a concrete test as to how that's going to look in terms of a provincial wide referendum, and then how that actually might affect Pierre Poilievre in a not so good way. But more on that later. We're going to start the video off with what Mark Carney has said recently at the NATO summit, specifically how, yeah, like 2% GDP that we're striving to hit, that we're apparently going to hit this year. It's now not 3%, not 4%. Turns out it's going to be closer to 5%. And Mark Carney goes to the media, but get this is the kicker. It's not CBC, it's not CTV, it's not independent media, it's not even Canadian media. He goes to CNN to talk about the matter. I don't understand. It should almost be illegal. Politicians in Canada should be banned from going to American press. That's American style politics. Oh, no, wait a second. That's what they said the Conservatives were doing. Funny how that works. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another video, everybody. Before we get into it, I do want to encourage y'all to hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. It does tremendously help grow the channel. We're going to start off with some American stuff, specifically taking a look at what Trump said on Air Force One earlier today.
Tired of it. I think they don't want it to happen again. And Iran's not going to have a nuclear weapon, by the way. I think it's the last thing on their mind right now.
Mr. President, did Iran make any commitments yesterday about uranium enrichment?
Know what?
About uranium enrichment.
They're not going to have enrichment, and they're not going to have a nuclear weapon, and they know that. They're going to get on to being a great trading nation. They're very good traders. And they're going to be a great trading nation, and they have a lot of oil. They're going to do.
See, that's all President Trump cares about is oil. And you know what? All of those problems could be solved if Canada just woke the heck up. But instead, Mark Carney is going over to Europe. Well, I mean, it is part of the NATO summit, but he obviously prefers, it's his love child. He prefers going to Europe to sell with them than to sell to America, which is so bizarre. But let's take a look at what actually came out of the NATO summit today. NATO's 5% benchmark would cost Canada not $15 billion a year, $150 billion per year. Prime Minister has been open to more spending, but hasn't yet committed specifically to 5%. Reminds me of Justin Trudeau. Signing on to a NATO's new defense spending target could cost the federal treasury up to $150 billion a year. Oh my goodness. Prime Minister Mark Carney said Tuesday in advance of the Western Military Alliance's annual summit. The Prime Minister made the comments in an interview with CNN International. Again, why is he gravitating towards American media? It's a lot of money, Carney said. On Wednesday, NATO members will debate increasing the benchmark for defense spending from the current 2% of GDP to a combined 5%. So 3.5% for direct military funding and 1.5% for defense infrastructure. Carney moved swiftly to break down those numbers. His government recently committed an additional $9.3 billion to this year's Department of National Defense budget, bringing the annual military operation to roughly $62 billion. But again, we have to add almost $100 billion to that. That's insane. We're only a third of the way there. No, this is just
this
wild.
Partnership that you've signed today, and recognizing that there is still some negotiation to do. Europe has its own defense industrial capacity challenges right now, just like Canada does. Can you explain how this particular partnership that you've signed today is going to get military equipment into the hands of the Canadian forces quickly, how it's going to expand Canada's defense industrial base, and how are you going to pay for it?
Yeah. So thank you very much for the question. The first thing, in terms of the challenges / opportunities that exist both for Europe and for Canada is that we're both embarking on major investments in our defense capacities. We have some complementarities that will allow us both to move more rapidly because we have excess capacity in certain areas. For example, one of the things we need in Canada is just straight munitions. Okay, a very simple thing. Cooperation in aerospace, where there are complementarities both in European leadership, but also some Canadian leadership as well. Complementarities in areas related to, sorry to use the jargon, but the defense industrial pledge, so related defense spending that has dual use or other uses. And President von der Leyen mentioned AI and cyber, those areas which will be incredibly important for defense. So right at the point where both of our jurisdictions need to increase to combat defense threats, we pool our resources, or we can pool much of our resources. We'll be more than the sum of the parts. And as we build up those resources, we can do those in a way that's complementary and mutually reinforcing. One of the ways we can pay for this is the fact that what we will do should be more efficient for both of us, should be more cost effective for both of us. The second thing is to recognize that if we do this right, we will also be building our overall economic capacity, which will be part of what's self-reinforcing.
Okay, so there you go. He's got everybody's attention, and it seems like he's really committed to making a deal and to spending more money. Now, I'm all for putting more money into our defense. I don't even think that $150 billion per year is enough for us to be putting into our defense. I think we should be doing more. And whatever number is thrown out there, we should be doing more than that because we absolutely need to protect ourselves. We have one of the biggest land masses in the entire world, and we have the least amount of protection. Like quite literally, I'm pretty sure Luxembourg at least has something more than what we do. We have no air defense. We have no missile defense. We don't even have nuclear submarines, nuclear powered submarines. So they're diesel powered. Only 1 out of 4 float. We have no aircraft carriers. We only have, I think, like 80 or 70 some planes. Like we don't really have a lot. But the thing about the way Mark Carney is proposing this is we don't have any transparency as to where that money is coming from. We're not expediting any oil and gas projects, at least not yet. And we don't know what social programs he's going to be cutting from, if any at all. So where is the money coming from? Look, if Mark Carney says, here's where the money's coming from, social programs are staying in place, we're not affecting anything domestically, and in fact, we're just selling more and more and more, then sure, that's objectively pretty freaking badass, and I will support it. But I don't yet see it. And instead of coming on to Canadian media, Mark Carney rushes to CNN, which is a slap in the face. So let's take a look at this American-style politics interview.
So how realistic is it in a time when you already have economic difficulties, so does some, Europe and others, to actually, you're at 2%, but now they want 3.5% and eventually 5%. Isn't that just going to cripple your budgets?
It's important. These are important questions, and it's important to be clear what we are potentially, and I think likely to all agree tomorrow, which is, and let's take the 5% of GDP figure, which is a huge number.
How much is it actually for you?
5% of our GDP would be about $150 billion.
I mean, that's a lot.
It's a lot of numbers.
Per year?
Per year.
That's a lot.
Of course, it is.
So it means that's stuff that you can't give to your own citizens.
Well, okay, but here, let's start to break it down. So part of it, a little less than a third of that overall number is spending on things that, quite frankly, we're already doing to build the resilience of our economy. So it can be domestic resilience. It can be defending in areas that support defense, but also support other things. So I'll give an example. Critical minerals. It is obvious, I think, to everyone now, the risk that's run being fully dependent on China for critical minerals, including rare earths, magnets, and others, not just for defense industry, but for the auto industry and others. Canada has has one of the biggest and most varied deposits of critical minerals,
which Trump was coveting.
we are going to develop those. We're going to develop those in Canadian interests. We're going to develop some of them in partnership with the European Union itself and European Union member states, with the UK, other partners. Some of the spending for that counts towards that 5%. In fact, a lot of it will count towards that 5% because it's infrastructure spending, it's ports and railroads and other ways to get these minerals out. So that's something that benefits the Canadian economy, but is also part of our NATO, our new NATO responsibility.
I mean, that's a cheeky little workaround. He found a way to convince NATO, in theory, that some domestic railroads and domestic infrastructure is contributing somehow to our NATO budget, which, I mean, if that works, then that works. Sure, let's check the box. But I do think that we also need a lot of submarines, aircraft carriers. We need more planes, more boats. We need a lot more stuff, more radar detection. I mean, there's a lot more things that we need that are actual defense, not railroad tracks. Like that's awesome. We should have tunnels in the Rocky Mountains for military equipment. We should have strongholds there, the way like Iran had dug through their tunnels. There's so many more things that we should be doing. We should have trade passages through the Rockies. I know it's extremely difficult to blast through it, sometimes almost impossible, but Switzerland's done a pretty good job going through their tunnels, right? They're through their mountains. So is the Middle East, and like Iran and stuff like that. So there's more things that we should be doing that aren't as necessarily archaic as railroad tracks, right? Great idea, but I mean, we gonna build it right through a town, a city that's already established? Come on.
So I'm not trying to downplay it. I think the other thing I would say is where we sit today, collectively, we NATO countries are likely to agree to the other component of that 2% going to the 3.5% in 10 years. But the nature of warfare is changing very rapidly. We just look at what's happening in Ukraine. I mean, you don't need an aircraft carrier anymore. Well, some do, but most of us don't. You need drones, and you need the integration of drones with your cyber capabilities, your broader satellite capabilities. We're making a commitment, but we're not.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't had enough time to process exactly this and sit down on a whiteboard, but I agree, but I also disagree. The pendulum swings. So right now, the new fancy thing is AI, it's drones, it's non-conventional warfare, right? Taking somebody's infrastructure, grid out, cybersecurity, cyber attacks, things like that. And yeah, that makes sense. We should be investing more into that stuff. Absolutely, we should be. But at some point, and if you want to actually hurt a country beyond just turning off their power, because let's be honest, we also have the ability to turn it back on relatively fast, at least we should. It's land invasions or air invasions or sea invasions, and you need aircraft carriers to be able to do that. So I wouldn't dismiss all that stuff. Now, should we be using, oil and gas for that, or should we be shifting to nuclear, have a first ever nuclear powered aircraft carrier, unless there's already one that exists? That's an idea, right? Like we should be incorporating nuclear, the forever energy, the cleanest energy into our equipment. I think that is a really good thing, but who am I? Whatever, right? Maybe Carney's onto something. Maybe he knows something that I don't, but I think that there's a balance to be had between new warfare and old warfare.
Locking ourselves in. We're not signing a bunch of post-dated checks for the hardware, military hardware of today to protect our citizens.
To protect our citizens tomorrow, as I assume what that end of the sentence was. Look, warfare is absolutely changing. In the conventional battleground of they're wearing blue shirts and we have red shirts and we're going to shoot the blues and the blues are going to shoot the reds, that doesn't fully exist as it used to. It is changing, and it probably will evolve in 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now and into the future. Once it evolves, it'll continue to evolve, and it'll constantly be ever evolving. But at some point, if we want to be able to cross that ocean, we can't just rely on drones. We can't just ship drones and sea containers to a Middle Eastern country or one of our allied NATO countries over there in the eastern part of the world and then just pilot them with Starlink or whatever. At some point, we need to be able to actually protect ourselves and patrol the seas. And you can only do that so much using technology. At some point, you need to actually physically do it. And that's where the traditional warfare style or traditional defense style comes really into play. But that's my opinion, folks. I would absolutely love to know yours. I think there is a balance to be made, and I'm all for it. Listen, I'm all for it, putting more money, more 100 billion extra a year, which is a lot of money, into our defense. But we got to know where the money's coming from. It has to be done responsibly, because I don't want that if we're just going to be continuously in perpetual debt that my kids and future generations are going to have to pay for. I think that there's a very good way of going about this and a very bad way of going about this. And the way Justin Trudeau has done it is very bad. And so Mark Carney still has yet to prove himself. But again, we're just gonna have to wait and see how this does play out. Now we're going to shift away and take a look at what's going on with Alberta. So here we go. We're taking a look at this recent by-election that just took place yesterday in Didsbury, which is actually, so this is at the provincial level in Alberta. Now, this is a riding that is neighboring Pierre Poilievre's new federal riding. Now, the UCP won 61%. And you might be thinking, well, that's good. Of course, that's good. Well, this is actually a stronghold. Strongholds are typically above 75%, in the 80%, okay? The Republican Party, the Separatist Party, now it's a new party. They just scooped up 17%, almost 20% of the voter base at the provincial level. This is huge. So yes, UCP wins, but you can see Strathcona for the NDP, 82.3%. Like, that's a stronghold. Republican Party didn't get much there, but they got a lot in Didsbury, which is again the neighboring riding to where Pierre Poilievre is going to be federally. Now, I know a lot of people say fake polls, fake news, but here's what the preferred prime minister polling is currently showing. Mark Carney at 52% and Pierre Poilievre down to 23%, and everyone else sub 3%. This is crazy because Pierre Poilievre is going to be going in his riding very soon. The by-election is going to be taking place likely in August, as early as sometime in August. And the riding itself, under the previous MP for the Conservatives, got like 82%. It's in the top 3 biggest stronghold ridings in Canada. So if Pierre Poilievre doesn't get more than 82%, if he gets 81%, 78%, or even something in the 60s of percentage, it goes to show that Alberta, it's just the timing of it. It's no fault of Pierre Poilievre on his own, perhaps. It's the timing of the separatist movement that's taking place in Alberta. And I mean, Pierre got the shit under the stick. He had a perfect opportunity against Trudeau, and Jagmeet screwed that up for him. And then Trump got involved with the tariffs and retaliatory tariffs, and Carney stepped in. Like, the timing of it was almost set to be a perfect storm. And then something catastrophic happened and took the wins right out of Pierre's sails. And I don't know if it's going to happen again with his by-election riding, but it might. That's all I'm saying. So let me know down in the comments if you think that the separatist movement in Alberta is stronger than the support for Pierre Poilievre, because it's gonna make or break the Conservatives at that point. But that's not actually what the center of this video is focused on. What the center of this video is focused on is this post here by Danielle Smith. Albertans have had enough of Ottawa's economic attacks on our province and know it's time to take a stand. That's why today I am launching the Alberta Next panel. Our province has contributed immensely to the prosperity of this country, yet Ottawa continues to attack our economy, abuse Alberta taxpayers with unfair equalization and federal transfers, and destructively interfere in multiple areas of provincial jurisdiction, from resource development and to environmental policy to childcare to healthcare. This status quo threatens our province's economic future and way of life. We owe it all to Albertans and future generations to address and solve this challenge without delay. The Alberta Next panel is a province-wide series of in-person and virtual town halls where your voice, your ideas, and your values will help shape Alberta's road ahead. The panel gives you a seat at the table to speak directly with government industry leaders, explore ideas for Alberta to assert our constitutional right to prosper, and discuss how we can protect Alberta from outside economic attacks going forward. This is pretty interesting. Let's see what Danielle Smith has to say in the video.
Alberta, our home. Pristine mountains and lakes, wide open pastures and fertile fields, unmatched natural resources, world-class cities, world-class people. Alberta truly has it all. We are a strong and free people, full of entrepreneurs, food producers, builders, caregivers, teachers, and a whole lot of hardworking, tough as nails, get her done grit. Our potential is as limitless as our skies. But let's face it, Alberta's being held back. Our economy has been under attack for most of the last 10 years. Frankly, off and on for decades long before then. Not by a foreign country or by world economic forces. No, Alberta's biggest threat to our prosperity and growth has come from our own nation's capital. Alberta has an Ottawa problem.
Woo! That's huge. That's a huge freaking statement. I mean, the World Economic Forum is obviously something to be considered, but saying that the biggest problem that Alberta faces is Ottawa? I mean, talk about rallying patriotism within Alberta. This is the thing about Danielle Smith. She's smart. I'll give her that. She's very smart because she's publicly stated that she doesn't support separatism. She doesn't have to, but she's choosing to play politics at the highest political level. I don't support the referendum, but if people want it, wink, wink, then go ahead. Wink, wink. By the way, Alberta, the biggest threat is Ottawa. Like, that just speaks volume of, hey, we got to do something about it. And the best way is form of separation, right? A form of referendum. This is pretty monumental.
Ottawa, led by successive Liberal governments propped up by their NDP allies, have taken direct aim at Alberta's core industries. Ottawa's Bill C-69 killed several major Alberta pipeline and resource projects. Their West Coast tanker ban specifically blocks Alberta oil from accessing world markets. Their excessive industrial carbon taxes and the new oil and gas emissions cap are designed to keep our world-class oil and gas reserves.
You know what this reminds me of? This is a OG Pierre Poilievre YouTube video. Like when he was running against Trudeau and Trudeau was caught in all those scandals and stuff like that. Like 2023, end of 2022, start of 2024, those days, like the real good gritty days. So Pierre's relocating to Alberta. Obviously, his editor and his team has followed him, and they're working with Danielle Smith at the provincial level because this video is incredible. This is an incredibly well put together video.
In the ground. And net zero mandates on everything from electricity to vehicles are causing the cost of living to increase, business costs to soar, and are even endangering the stability of our power grid in the dead of winter. And the effects on Alberta's economy have been staggering. In just the last 10 years alone, more than $500 billion, that's $500 billion, in global investment capital destined for our resource sector has disappeared. It walked away from Alberta and Canada, and instead headed off to Texas, Asia, and the Middle East, to places that welcome resource development and jobs. That cost Alberta and Canada quite literally hundreds of billions in GDP, corporate taxes and resource royalties for healthcare, education, and public infrastructure. It cost hundreds of thousands of jobs and thousands of healthy and growing businesses. It was national self-harm on a level never seen. And no province was hurt more than ours. And those costs keep building every single day. But we're not just losing investment, we're losing trust. As I said, this story is bigger than just the last decade. Alberta has been treated unfairly for decades long before that. We've built roads, rail, power, jobs, and prosperity for this country. Yet we've been told to keep quiet and be grateful while sending $20 billion a year more to Ottawa than we receive back in funding each year. In fact, since 1980, Alberta has contributed $653 billion more to federal taxes than we receive back. That means well over $500 billion went directly from Alberta to fund other provinces, mostly with economies larger than ours, through programs, transfers, and equalization. And despite this, we have continued.
Dude, not one single drop of equalization has ever made its way to Alberta. Isn't that crazy? Quebec is getting like $13 billion or something a year for what? What does Quebec offer other than the wrong types of street signs? You know what I'm saying? And just lashing out at English folk or French immersion folk. It's wild. My goodness, Albertans, if this video ain't motivating you to want to go your own way and distance yourself from Canada, I don't know what else will. This is making me want to buy a small little piece of property with a shack on it in Alberta just so I can vote. And that, ladies and gentlemen, concludes this video. I'd love to know what you guys think down below in the comments. Do you think that Alberta is going to separate? Do you think that we're actually going to be able to meet $150 billion a year spending in our defense budget? Let me know what you guys think. As always, if you haven't yet already, I'd like to encourage you guys to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in another video. Bye for now.